Next, we are going to talk about the story structure, the characters, and go through chapters 1 through 3. So, when you guys are reading, here's what we're going to be focusing on in the novel. You're going to be looking at what does the mockingbird symbolize, who are the mockingbirds in society, how do the characters change and grow. We're going to be looking at Atticus's argument in the Tom Robinson case. We're going to be looking about the message about society, and you're also going to be looking at conformity and kind of comparing and see what was the cause of people to act this way, and why did some people break free but others didn't. And you'll be reading nonfiction articles along the way. So I want to talk about a little bit about how this story is structured. So it's written in a first-person point of view. Scout is telling us this story looking back on her childhood. I want you to pause the video and turn to page chapter 1 in your book. So you'll have to go a few pages, but it's like the first page. So turn to page 3. It's page 3 in your book. And I'm going to read to you the passage. So go ahead and pause. And then when you're ready, unpause. So on page 3, it starts out, we're at the first paragraph. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. When it healed, Jem's first fears of never being able to play football were assuaged. He was seldom self-conscious about his injury. His left arm was somewhat shorter than his right. When he stood or walked, the back of his hand was at right angles to his body. His thumb was parallel to his thigh. He couldn't have cared less, so long as he could pass and punt. Even enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them. We sometimes discussed the events leading to his accident. I maintain that the Yule started it all, but Jem, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. He said it began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Bradley come out. So, what Scout's telling us here is that this is like older Scout looking back, and she's going to tell us the story of how Jem broke his arm. So she's going to start, 2 summers ago. So this book is going to span 2 summers, the school years, and all leading up to how did Jem break his arm. But there's going to be more little stories within that. So this is kind of like a story within a story, what is called a frame tale or a flashback. So the main plot we'll see is the Tom Robinson trial. But we'll also see other plots of Miss Dubose, fire, the kids getting Boo Radley to come out. But it's all leading up to how did Jem break his arm. Some main characters that are important to know is the Finch family. So we have Jem, Scout, and Atticus. They're all the Finch family. Scout's real name is Jean Louise, but Scout is her nickname. So we have Atticus. He is their father, Jem and Scout's father. He's a lawyer, a widower, so his wife died. Jem and Scout's mom died when Scout was just a baby, like 2 years old. He's older, he's quiet, educated. A lot of people consider him to be kind of a rebel, meaning that he kind of goes against the crowd. We have Jem. He's 10 years old at the start of the novel, and by the end will be 12. We're going to see him grow and mature over the novel. He has a lot to learn, and he's kind of at this stage in life where he has to open his eyes to kind of the harsh realities of society. Then we have Scout. She's 6 at the beginning, and then near the end she'll be 8. She's a tomboy. She just does and says whatever she thinks. She has like no filter, and we're going to kind of see that come out as we read. Some other important main characters that you'll meet in the beginning are Dill. He's a friend who visits in the summers. He's about 7 years old. His aunt is Miss Rachel, who lives next door to the Finch family. Kind of has a rough life, and he likes to tell a lot of tall tales and lies to kind of like cover up his embarrassment. So you'll see that throughout. We also have the Radleys. They live 3 doors down from the Finches. And the Radleys are at the center of the urban legend or, town myth that the kids believe. So you will be introduced to him today. Next, we have Calpurnia. She's the children's nanny, and she's worked for the family since Jem was a baby, and she's kind of like a surrogate mother figure for the kids. And finally, we have Miss Stephanie. She is the town gossip. Here's a map of the town. See, here's the main road. The Finches in purple, they live on the main road. 3 doors down here in yellow is the Radley place. The green is the kids' schoolhouse. And then down this way is the courthouse where Atticus works as a lawyer and also where the trial is going to take place. As you can see, the town's pretty compact, not super spread out, and is based off of the town that the author grew up in, the layout at least. All right, so as we go through the chapters, we will be stopping and pausing, so have your books ready. We're going to be looking at some passages as we go. So in chapter 1, we're introduced to the main characters. Scout, who's older looking back, is going to tell us, like I mentioned, about how Jem broke his arm. So the story starts all the way back to when Scout was 6 years old. She gives us kind of a history of her family and the town, and they're introduced to, and they meet Dill Harris. So let's look at what the description of the town is. So turn to page 5 in your books, and then pause the video to get to page 5, and when you're ready, hit play. Okay, so on the very bottom of page 5, we get a description of the town. I'm going to read it to you. Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town when I first knew it. In rainy weather, the streets turned a red slop. Grass grew on the sidewalks. The courthouse sagged in the square. Somehow it was hotter then. A black dog suffered in the summer's day. Bony mules hitched to Hoover carts flicked flies in sweltering shade of the live oaks on the square. Men's stiff collars wilted by 9 in the morning. Ladies bathed before noon, after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were like soft tea cakes with frosting of sweat and sweet talcum. People moved slowly then. They ambled across the square, shuffled in and out of the stores around it, took their time about everything. A day was 24 hours long, but seemed longer. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go, nothing to buy, and no money to buy it with, nothing to see outside the boundaries of Maycomb County. But it was a time of vague optimism for some of the people. Maycomb County had recently been told that it had nothing to fear but fear itself. We lived on the main residential street in town. Atticus, Jem, and I, plus Calpurnia, our cook. Jem and I found our father satisfactory. He played with us, read to us, and treated us with courteous detachment. So, you can see this town is not super exciting. It's tired, it's old. The description, she personifies this town, showing us that it's sagging. We can tell everyone's the depressions hit them hard. Everyone's poor, slow going. That kind of gives you a sense of the town, but in a sense, it's not only slow going in their day-to-day, but maybe in a sense she's trying to tell us that it's slow going in terms of their perspective, in terms of their treatment of other people, in terms of their ability to change their minds. So just keep that in mind as we go. All right, so then they meet Dill. The kids talk about how they like to do little plays, so there's not a lot to do in the town. So what the kids do is, from books they've read, they put on little plays of what they've read. So we kind of get introduced to that they meet Dill. The 3 of them start putting on plays together. And then they get this idea of trying to get Boo Radley to come out of this house. So there is this urban legend in town about Boo Radley. I want you guys to turn to page 9 in your books, and you're going to read the second paragraph that starts with but the end of August, all the way to page 10 to the second paragraph that ends with as long as anyone could remember. So I want you to pause the video. You guys can read that out loud as a class and talk about Boo Radley, what does he look like? So go ahead and pause, and when you're ready, restart the video. Alright, now that you've read about Boo Radley, we also see later on, he again will, Jem will talk about him again as they actually see Mr. Radley later in the day. So to kind of give you a family tree of the Radleys, we have Mr. Radley, Mrs. Radley, and then they have 2 sons. One of their sons, Boo, is the one who you read up about, Arthur or Boo. Now, later on, Jem, Dill, Scout, they see Mr. Radley passing through. And Jem and Calpurnia describe him as being the meanest man that God ever blew breath into. So this is Mr. Radley, the dad of Boo. They think he's mean. He doesn't really have a job. They don't really know what he does, but he's not friendly. Then Miss Stephanie Crawford, the town gossip, comes up. And Jem and Miss Stephanie, they start telling us some more tall tales about Boo. So I want you guys to go to page 13 and read the very end to page 14, the first 3 chapters. So you're going to read from on 13, Jem said, he goes out all night, all the way to the last paragraph, the 3rd paragraph on page 14 that ends with, and he drooled most of the time. So go ahead and take a minute, pause, and read, and then start the video when you're ready. So now you've read another description about Boo. We can see that all of these descriptions are probably, we don't know what we should believe. But at the end of this chapter, Jem is dared to go run up and hit the house, so he does it. He goes and slaps their front door. So we see this is not a super mature moment by Jem. But now that we've read about Boo, we can see that he's subject to the town gossip. He's kind of the urban legend. Here's the story we got about him. We don't know if it's necessarily, real or not, or how much is gossip, but here's what we know. That he got in with the wrong crowd as a teenager, got arrested for doing all kinds of wild stuff. His family decided instead of sending him to a reform school where he probably would have, turned his life around, had a good life, they locked him up in the courthouse basement. He almost died of the mildew and mold. So they locked him up at home, was never seen again. Then there's a story with the stabbing him in the legs with scissors. So that's pretty much all we know about him. And then we get the description about what he looked like. So based on those descriptions that you read, pause the video and on a scrap piece of paper, draw what you think Boo Radley and his house look like. When you're ready, unpause the video and begin. All right, hopefully you guys have drawn that and maybe shared it with the class. Now we're going to go into chapter 2. So in chapter 2, Scout starts 1st grade, summer is over, Dill has returned home. Her 1st grade class is filled with kids of all ages. A lot of kids have failed and have to repeat the class. So there's some kids who are probably like 10 or 12 in her 1st grade class. The town kids, it's explained, usually go straight through school because they don't really miss out. But the farm kids, they miss a lot of school because they, help with harvest time, work at home, and so they always get held back. So just like it's Scout's first day, it's her teacher's first day, and her teacher makes a lot of mistakes because she's not from Maycomb, and she just doesn't understand the community, and so she lets the kids get to her, and she just doesn't really understand the kids and the community. The teacher gets really mad at Scout because Scout's able to read and write. In 1st grade, none of these kids really should know how to read and write. But Scout was, Scout learned how, and because Atticus taught her. Scout also makes some mistakes where she, there's a kid, Walter, who has no lunch, and she points it out. Again, doesn't really know how to control her mouth. And so the teacher pats her with a rule or like smacks her hands with a rule or as punishment and gets stuck in the corner. All right, chapter 2 continued. So again, like I mentioned, Miss Caroline's from the north, not the south. She just doesn't understand Maycomb. Most kids are farm kids and don't care about school. And Walter Cunningham, we know, he is a poor farm kid. He doesn't bring a lunch. She offers him a quarter, but that was kind of a big no-no because people in this town don't like to take charity. So Walter took it the wrong way. Scout, again, she tries to explain this and it gets in trouble. Chapter 3, we starts out with Scout beating up Walter Cunningham because she blames him for getting her in trouble. Jem invites Jem, who also goes to school at the same building, pulls Scout off of Walter and invites him over for lunch to their house. In this era, like, farm kids who lived on the outskirts or were bussed in would eat lunch at school, but town kids would walk home and go eat lunch at their house. So Jem invited Walter to go home with them, and again, Scout is kind of rude to Walter, insults him because Walter wants to pour syrup, molasses, it's like a syrupy type stuff, all over his dinner, and Scout calls him out on it, basically says it's weird, and she gets in trouble by Calpurnia for insulting her company. So we kind of again see that Scout just doesn't understand social cues and doesn't understand why she shouldn't say something when she finds something like weird or wrong. Another thing family we meet in chapter 3 is we get introduced to the Yule family. Now they'll be they'll be out throughout the book. We'll see them a lot. So we meet Burris Yule. He's one of the Yule children. He's in Scout's class. He's probably like 10 or 12 and in the first grade still. And it's very common for the Yule kids. They come to school, they're all dirty, gross. Burris has like, they call cooties. He's like, has lice, all kinds of stuff. The Yules only go to school on the first day, and the state really doesn't do anything about it because they've kind of given up on the Yules. Bob Yule he doesn't work. He's really rude. He's a drunk. He spends all their government assisted money on alcohol. Kids are always filthy. They live right next to the town dump, like the landfill, and like scavenge for stuff to sell. The town kind of looks the other way and tries to avoid the Yules because he's just such an unpleasant person. As long as kids are getting fed, that's all they really care about, but he tries to kind of avoid that. So going into chapter 4, you guys are kind of going to begin reading more about school with Scout, and the kids become more and more obsessed with Boo Radley. We wanted to skip the first 3 chapters so you guys can kind of get into the meat of the book. And plus, the chapters 1 through 3 can kind of be a little bit slow. So hopefully this helped you, and enjoy reading chapters.